Will Gray and I worked together at Technion and Resultant for almost a decade. Will recently built CalmTales, a storytelling app especially geared for parents of autistic children. Will's story and the story of CalmTales is worth hearing. Will, thanks for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me, David. And it's always good to connect with you. I loved our time at Technion and Resultant and excited about what you're doing with Giddy Up Data and excited to share the story of CalmTales as well.
Well, that's awesome. Well, tell us about your family and what led to CalmTales.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a father, first and foremost. I have three children, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 10-month-old. And just, I love being a dad. And our 8-year-old, he is autism. And one of the key components of that is something called echolalia, which I didn't know about, but it really expresses itself through repetitive words. And so he specifically gets fixated on his favorite restaurants, whether that's Chick-fil-A or Cane's or Lupe Tortilla or Culver's. When his mind is on that, he will just hammer us with those words. And so, we'll hear them what feels like 1,000 or 1,500 times a day. I don't even try to count them. And when that becomes very difficult, being, parents of three children, is at bedtime. And we were struggling with bedtimes being 2 to 3 hours long. And that really robbed our time from our other children. And it just became something we dreaded in our day. And I started exploring different techniques. And fortunately, with LLMs and generative AI, specifically Claude and ChatGPT, I started diving in and learned, one, the repetitive words had a name called echolalia, and that there's a whole world of research into that. And I had started building bedtime stories, and the kids absolutely love those bedtime stories that are AI generated because you can tailor them to what they wanted in those days. And then I started just putting in some of the research findings that we had into specifically wit stories and developed a certain style of prompt that leveraged different techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy, some hypnosis techniques, and others based on that research, and found he was going to sleep much, much quicker. Bedtimes felt normal again. And, specifically, our routine is we do bath, we brush our teeth, we get the PJs on, we read a story, both rather if that was from the book or from something that was through ChatGPT or Claude, and then prayers. And with Wit specifically, we found the combination of Wit's our 8-year-old, both the story from CalmTales and music. His favorite is the James Taylor Sweet Baby James song. He calls it the cowboy song. And that combination has led to us just having normal bedtimes, which has been just amazing, both for him, our other children, and then just the time before bed for my wife and I, which has been really nice to have. And we also found that just wasn't the bedtime, but he used to wake up at like 2:30 a.m., 3:30 a.m. And I don't know if this is correlated or not to the story, but he's been sleeping through the whole night for the past 6 months.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a blessing. And I found myself with some time, in August. I no longer at Technion/Resultant, and decided to see if this could help other parents. And what came out of just me diving into that over the past month or so was CalmTales. Fortunately, we just released it on the App Store, which is kind of the culmination or the start of this journey of it being something that's real.
Now, before we jump into like CalmTales and how it works and how you built it, just another question about the story. And that is, you wrote on LinkedIn that you were fighting the repetition instead of embracing it. And I'm wondering what the shift looked like when you started embracing the repetition and how that helped and some of that journey.
Absolutely. So, echolalia specifically, there's something that my son wants from a reaction, and at first it was like, just stop saying that word, say anything else. I'm tired of it. Say something different. And that wasn't giving him what he really needed. And so, you know, what I've learned and how I've tried to adjust my response, and I'm flawed, so I still sometimes fight, is if I can incorporate that into something else. So whether that's I respond by singing a song about Lupe Tortilla or Chick-fil-A, excuse me, it, it helps calm him and says, I hear you. I know you want this. And specifically with children with autism, he wants a routine. He wants to know when he's going to get that. And that's the question he has in the back of his mind, or that I believe he does. And so if I can plant a flag saying on Tuesday or two more sleeps from now, you're going to get this, that's really helped. And so by incorporating and bringing it in, it's really just helps a tremendous amount.
I imagine hearing that for parents who are undergoing similar struggles could be a game changer, just that
Yeah,
right there.
I hope so. It can feel lonely. And fortunately, there's a lot of communities, and we're blessed with some amazing teachers and speech language therapists in his life. But you know, when you're lacking sleep or exhausted from the day, and then you face that, it can be a challenge. And so, fortunately, we've seen an immense amount of progress just by leaning into it rather than fighting it.
When I first read your post, I thought, vibe coding for good. And so on the good side, well, this is you giving back to the community and helping people out, which I love to see and want to encourage. On the vibe coding side, just a word for those who might not know what that
Yeah.
even means. It's a good question. I don't think the people who use the word really knows what it means anyway.
No.
But it's the idea of using AI to help you develop, help you create apps like CalmTales, like Will has done. So, what about your building of CalmTales? Was it strictly vibe coding or some mix of hands-on coding and vibe coding? How did that go down?
So a little bit about my background. I'm a data junkie at heart. And so I've spent my career helping organizations make sense of their data. And, my coding experience probably was light SQL, maybe some Python, or writing some formulas in Excel to help, jockey and munge data together, with some experience with AI modeling as well. Um, but by no means would you have called me an application development, person, app dev person. Although I worked across many different projects that involved app dev, have a lot of friends in that space and former colleagues in that space. But AI has really opened up that window. And I would say vibe coding on its own is probably across the spectrum. Um, and I think about it as like, oh, I'm feeling a vibe and I'm trying to get something out based on just what I'm feeling and adjusting and moving on the fly rather than just kind of the traditional, you know, plan of what we're going to do and the requirements and the end state that we're going to do. I'm kind of letting the story reveal itself. So like how Michelangelo would chip and say, the statue is within the marble. I'm going to chip away at it. I think we're feeling the vibes of what that is. Um, on one spectrum of vibe coding, you have things like Bolt and Lovable, which you just put a prompt in. There's no technical aspect of it, and it's just going to output something, and that's what you're going to go with. And you don't understand what's behind the scenes, and so when you think about like safety, privacy, how it works in general, you just don't understand it. I started CalmTales and Replit, which is probably a little bit more technical, but has that front end of you just start with the prompt, it's going to build out and it does it extremely well. But that led to me getting deep in the code. One, I wanted to make sure from a safety and security standpoint that I felt comfortable with it because it's going to have my data in it. It's going to have my kids' data in it. I wanted to be able to say, hey, this is great. Two, I wanted to make sure that we weren't collecting any data that we didn't need to make the app functional. So there is the ability to create we use Apple authentication as an option in that app. They have something called private relay, so you don't have to give up your actual email. You don't have to put your child's name in. We say child's first name or nickname. And so you don't have to give specifics about your children. There are, what does your child look like? You can shape that however you want. We use that just to help inform the image that's generated. And a lot of those fields are optional. And so, this is the parents in control of what's going into the app. And taking a step back, because we'll probably dive into a little bit of the privacy and security stuff in a little bit. But on the vibe coding front, I started hitting walls of things that the AI agent wanted to do. It was making changes and it was breaking stuff, and I couldn't understand it. And it started getting really expensive. Within those apps, it's obfuscated. Their agents run. You don't know which model they're really using. And so, I used Replic's IDE that they have natively in there. I put Claude code in it. And then I started diving deeper in the code, asking Claude to walk me through where these changes are, what's happening. And very quickly, I decided to move the database out, moved it over to Firebase within Google's realm with the Google, everything Google kind of watching over it. And so it belongs as part of that Google workspace. And then Auth became part of Firebase. And very quickly, the app was no longer existed in Replit. Replit was just the editor for the code. And it just made sense to move that into VS Code and take a traditional approach, leveraging things like GitHub for version control. And it became more of this true software development lifecycle. So much in the vibe coding, and I'm putting that in quotes, it removes the user from what we've learned over our careers as a software development lifecycle of having kind of this development environment, this testing environment, this production environment. Everything vibe coded goes straight into production. And so you're breaking things live for users as you're publishing and putting it out there. And when it comes to getting something into the Apple App Store and wanting an app that people are going to experience, and if it doesn't work during a child's bedtime and they're counting on that routine, that is not a good thing. And so very quickly, a couple weeks into this, realized you have to go into the development. Unfortunately, AI helps you learn the code, understand it. But AI is limited, just like us as humans. There's something called context, which is the amount of information it can hold that it knows. And as that context window fills up, it can lose track and it starts making random changes across the board. And so there's a whole lot of techniques as your code base, as the app becomes more complicated, of how to make sure that you're staying in the right track. And fortunately, I think AI is good at augmenting and accelerating what we do as humans. It's not there when you're getting into more of the complex application build. It is great for piloting.
A couple of things here. First of all, I love the education side because you're vibe coding, but then as you start to develop into more of a true development life cycle, you're actually using AI to teach you what it's done, and you're learning that way.
Absolutely. And always asking the questions of why did you do it this way? And it has certain biases. A funny story, and pivoting a little bit away from CalmTales, I was discussing vibe coding with a college student. He reached out and it was like, I was given this challenge of recreating this website using vibe code. And what do I do with that? Um, and I was like, you should go get Lovable. You should go get Bolt. You should download Cursor. You should get VS Code, put Claude Code in that. You should get Replit and give the same prompt, right? The same statement of what you want to all of them and see what it comes up with. Because they're all going to do things a little bit differently. And then when you start asking, well, why did you do it this way? You get interesting answers back. An example was, as I was talking with him, I gave a prompt of what I would want to build based off of what his ideas are. And the AI agent responded, well, we should use Firebase. Well, because it knew I used Firebase previously with this app. I knew that's probably not the right choice. It should be on a more relational model. And it was like, why? It's like, oh, because you used it here, but you're right. This Supabase is probably a better thing to use as its backend. So you need to always challenge, and there's specific techniques to ensure that you're kind of getting the raw thoughts as well.
That's so interesting. I like that memory and that context is especially interesting. As you and I talked about, before we started this recording, Claude 4.5 Opus dropped yesterday, and apparently there's infinite context now. So you can go on as long as you want to go in a single chat, and Claude has done Anthropic has done some sort of magic in the background so that it doesn't forget. But that's going to add another challenge with the context, because it'll remember your choice of Firebase and your choice of whatever else, maybe in the distant past. Who knows?
And it's Opus is very strong. It's probably the most exciting model to drop this week because there's a new model that drops every week. Gemini was the hot thing last week, and then before that, it was GPT 5.1 that everybody said was the game changer. Rock is going to have their model probably drop, another model dropping in a few weeks. You can go on the Polymarket and see who's betting on who's going to have the best model by the end of the year, and place bets on it, which is usually, is a good leading indicator of who's next up. The infinite context window, I think, is misleading because the context on Claude Opus is still 200,000 tokens. Tokens is a set of 3 or 4 words or short phrases. And what it's doing is it's not in Claude Code, it's just in the Claude desktop app and the web app, it's basically auto compacting the conversation and summarizing as it goes, which then could lead to, well, did you forget about this little detail up here because it didn't think it was important as part of a summarization? And so I think there's plenty of chats where I've run out of room and I'm like, man, I'd love to keep going. And that feature of having infinite, chat is important, but it's different than probably the idea of infinite context because context deteriorates over time. An example of this is Claude has a 200,000 K context window. Gemini has a 1 million context window, and you would say, oh, well, Gemini's better because it just can hold more information. Well, I think it's more of Claude cut it off at 200,000 because that's probably the quality window that like Anthropic feels good about. Gemini leaves it open, so it has more information that it can reference, but it rots as it starts filling up. And so just kind of an important distinction. And an example of this conversation we're having here is important. Why, if you have an idea and you're going to develop in prototyping, getting underneath the hood is extremely important to understanding what is being built. Why am I having all these issues? And the reason I learned all this, right? Fortunately, I've been in the space I'm working with AI and LLMs for many years, but just in this project, learning why it's making mistakes or why it's changing something that it shouldn't change when I asked it to do X, Y, Z. It's important. And so anybody who's going to start vibe coding or has an idea they want pursuing, they should absolutely do it. But you're going to have some grit to get in there and understand the why. And you're going to learn a ton and have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, I've got so many questions percolating in my mind about vibe coding, but we should get back to CalmTales
Absolutely.
and just walk through the app. Can you share it? Can you share it on your screen? And
Absolutely.
yeah, maybe walk us through how the app works and how it's going to help parents, help
All
kids.
right. Um, so this is the app. We're logged in as kind of a demo account. And so you'll see we already have a child named Alex in here. Um, there's a moon that's kind of bouncy. It's fun. For anybody watching this video, here's the Easter egg. You tap it 3 times, and it's going to shoot confetti. Um, and I wanted to keep the stimulus in this app low because of the audience of the children, but I am a big fan of Ready Player One and Easter eggs. And so I wanted to have a little Easter egg in there for folks. Um, when you get to kind of the main dashboard or the main screen, you have the ability to create a new profile. So it walks you through creating the name and going back to privacy. I'm always conscious of who I'm giving my data to. And so nicknames are totally viable. You have control of kind of what you want to do and input from that standpoint. And so we'll put Bob as a nickname for this child. You can select the years. So it's not taking the specific age, it's just doing viable age range. We'll say Bob is 3.5 years old, boy. And then sensitivity notes. Specifically for my son, loud noises is what we put in here. But it could be anything that you want. And this is incorporated into the story going forward. So if there's a rocket ship that is being launched in the story, it'll probably react, and the story will say, and the rocket launches, but it's a soft launch. It's calming, which to us, it doesn't make sense. But for a child, it's just kind of reassuring at bedtime. Appearance, you kind of choose hair length, hair color, more of a generic type of hair color, skin tone. You can leave these as default or change them. They wear glasses, you can say glasses. And then selecting interests. We took a lot of interests that are just generic and in there, and you have the ability to add some as well. So we can do planes, space, and my son specifically, he likes ceiling fans, and I can't spell it. So we can add that interest as well. Favorite color, green. So it's going to incorporate the colors into the story. And so it'll say like the fan is green, or his favorite green blanket, or stuffy. And so we could say blanket as a key object. And then you have the ability to, for design for every kid. But if you want to use the research based features specifically for echolalia, you have the ability to create that toggle. And it actually, there are 2 different prompts that it gives. You kind of have our standard prompt for a calming bedtime, and then you have the echolalia optimized prompt that goes out. And so for your child, if they have repetitive words, I would put this on. For most children, you're probably not having that toggle available. And it successfully create the profile. We'll go down to generate a new story, and we'll say the focus word is choo choo. And I want this to be focused around a bedtime routine, include an image, shorter story, keeping it calm and peaceful. And it goes and generates. And then a fun little, another thing it does is it incorporates their interests as little icons. It floats those up through there as it's creating that story as well.
That's great.
And then it'll paint that picture for you, and it renders while it's doing that. You have the ability to adjust the reading settings. So I can choose text size. I can choose to make it truly a dark mode right there. I could choose to do dyslexic text for older children who want to read the story along with you. And if they're dyslexic, that helps. I'm dyslexic, so I keep that setting on for me. It adds a blue light filter as well. You have immersive reading mode, which gets rid of everything behind it and makes it just a much easier thing to read. You can highlight the keywords and phrases. And so if I scroll down here, it's going to highlight choo choo every time that appears in the story. And then you can take deep breathing cues and turn that on or off. And so if I have it on, you can see that it'll pause in the middle of the story and add in, breathe in, hold, breathe out. I find specifically for my son that works really well. And so it gives you the story, the image, and I typically start reading the story because the image does take longer to render. And then we come back and look at the image at the end of the story as kind of a surprise. We read through the story, and it adds phrases like safe and cozy in bed, reassuring language like everything is calm and quiet, specifically around breathing. For echolalia backed research, we find that having their hands on their belly and feeling that breath helps them learn to take deeper breaths and feeling that reassuring calmness. And so that's incorporated as part of our back end prompt. And then different techniques of like balling up and releasing for your toes and your fingers. And then you have the ability to save the story or favorite it. By default, the first story for each child is automatically saved to their library, so you can always go back and reference that. And then another cool feature from a more technical side is you have the ability to rate the story. So if I like the story, I can give it a thumbs up and a 5-star rating, and it'll save that. Of course, you can add free text in there as well to let us know, but we will be adding in more research as that's done, and then A/B testing new stories as those happen. And so if the B tested stories get to a certain level of user feedback, those will be issued more throughout the app as well. So we can better understand what works, what doesn't, what's helpful at bedtime, what's not helpful at bedtime. And then you can go back and you can go view the library. And so it's added that story into the library. And then up top, as long as you're favoriting, you'll have a carousel of all the different stories that they have. And then, of course, your standard kind of menu where you can manage your account, learn a little bit about my story and my son's story, and then just the recent stories that were created as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you see CalmTales evolving in the future? I mean, you just mentioned that about adding more, changing things based on research, based on data that you get. I love that. There's some data-driven decisioning there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us more about that, please.
For me, the data that we want to do it's not really about the user, right? So much of what we're used to is the user being the commodity. For me, it's more about, is the story helpful? Is it not? And so that data is going to inform the features and things we equip. Already some of the components that I want to add from a backlog standpoint are continuation stories, or sequel. So let's say Bob here liked his story about the little green airplane. Can I just click a button that says create a sequel story that continues that narrative? The next one is probably, routines are very important. So can I have a morning story that preps my child for the day especially if things are unexpected? It's Thanksgiving holiday, and my son is struggling because he doesn't have school this week. And he loves school and the routine of going to school. So how can I prep him for what's going to happen today or for the holidays? And so having maybe holiday stories to introduce the concepts of holidays as well, and the unexpected changes of who's going to be coming and arriving. One of the features I've been hesitant to put in is an AI reader, because I think one of the important things are parents reading to their children. But for older children, they might want to have a longer story that's 20 minutes, 30 minutes that's read to them. especially if a parent has to leave and put that down. So I'll be investigating. Um, that feature was partially baked in, and I decided to pull it out because I really wanted that parent-child bonding. But reincorporating that in. One user asked if they could have Snoop Dogg read it, but there's probably some copyright issues to that as well.
I'll give them a
Yeah,
call
and
for you.
I would appreciate that.
But
Um,
just a thought on the reading. I've been working with 11 Labs, some training my own
they
voice,
they do
and
amazing things. Yeah.
yeah, I was just wondering about like a parent who's traveling, for instance, might like to
Mhm.
have the bedtime story read to them. Or you mentioned also other stories throughout the day, maybe a morning story where sitting down with the child may be less practical and less necessary, yet the child could still get a story while mom or dad is fixing breakfast.
Absolutely. I love that. And then the last thing is siblings, specifically designing stories to help explain why does my brother or sister do X, Y, Z, and helping that and helping increase empathy amongst the other children in the family. And so that was another feature that's kind of in our backlog.
Oh, that's great. It just helps unify the family
Yeah,
instead of making it
exactly.
just all about the individual child.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things that you're hearing from parents?
So during our testing, um, one, it works across the whole family, has been one of the more powerful things. And so that's been really encouraging. Um, and then two, that it's just had early success. And I was blown away when I posted the story about my son and I on both LinkedIn and Facebook, the reaction we got and the amount of support and people who were sharing it. And so I think it really hits home of just going and solving a personal problem and sharing it with the world. It's just feel immense amount of support with that. Um, it's still early. We just got in the App Store last Thursday. So all I have is kind of the test user feedback right now, but definitely will be combing through, the what kind of stories are people liking, what's working for that. We have 10 5-star reviews on the App Store already, which, I never expected. So I think that's good. Although, if you do go, selfless plug, if you do go on the App Store and rate it, it does help boost it. And once we get to 20, that's when it really helps with SEO or search engine optimization with the App Store. So please go like and review after you use it. Only if you actually enjoy the app. I don't want to, falsify it.
Done.
Yes.
So, getting towards the end here, what are some things that you would say in closing? Like, are there any safety and privacy things that you want to look at? Anything that you want to share maybe with parents that are currently fighting some of these bedtime battles?
And we covered a lot of the safety, right? We're using kind of best in class tools, encryption where it matters and across the whole tool. There's the privacy standpoint. You can be anonymous and use it using Apple Relay. But from an AI standpoint, one of the things we spent a lot of time on was helping prevent prompt injection. So if somebody tries to put in, um, I guess the best is probably a story. I have one of my friends who's probably a little bit more edgy go in and build a story. He built a story about Tater and said, things like cocaine and some other inappropriate things that I'm not going to say on this podcast. And I was proud because our filtering worked. It prevented it from coming in. Which was very encouraging to see that by doing the right filtering, making sure the prompts are structured in the right way, you can do that. Another kind of sidebar learning from that is you can actually teach the model things. And so in our filtering of don't do this, it started not doing that in the story of like specifically around responding with certain markdown instructions. And so it started using some of the characteristics of what not to do that were, this was specifically like asterisk stars. It would randomly asterisk random things in there. And so that it wasn't sure what to do with, which was kind of neat from a testing standpoint, but from a usability standpoint, it didn't apply. And so that was a learning I had as I was building this out. Another fun component that was built in was is internet required. So it does have offline capabilities. You have access to your library when you're offline. It can't generate a story offline because it's not going to be able to make the call out and leverage AI. We have looked at doing some on-device LLM type of components, but that gets a little tricky with how to do, and you have less control over how it's going to respond and the quality. So if, an example is we feel really good about the model we're using within Gemini and what it's giving back. But if you're an offline and we have to go to, let's say, iOS's Apple Intelligence model that's on device, that's a much smaller model, and we're less comfortable with that story response that's coming back. We'd much rather the user go and read something from the library on it. But that is something, as those improve and the smaller models getting better and better, that we're going to continue to investigate putting into the app.
This has been a lot of fun, Will. Thank you so much for sharing your personal journey and also the journey of CalmTales. Exciting to see how vibe coding for good is becoming a thing, though also exciting to see how you extend it beyond vibe coding and used AI to teach you and improve your own game.
Oh, I was feeling vibes the whole time. So.
It was always vibe coding.
Yeah, it's always been that way.
Oh, that's beautiful. So wishing you all the best success here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'll talk soon.